Hello, in this video I'm going to go over my pure class Magicka Warden build that I have created. Um, Kind of a fun build because this leans really far into class identity with the pure class build of the Warden, and then I'm also using the class set from the Infinite Archive called Aerie's Cry. If you're not familiar with Infinite Archive sets or how to get them, I have done a video on how I recommend farming those. As you can see, I have all of the gear sets out of there. They're fairly easy to farm if you get a good system going down. But Aerie's Cry, if you're not familiar with this, it gives you 1 line of penetration, 2 lines of weapon damage, and then when you deal a light attack, you apply Eagle's Mark to the enemy for 12 seconds, and it causes an eagle to strike every 3 seconds, dealing physical damage per attack. And then also applying the Eagle's Mark grants you Aerie's Call for 12 seconds, increasing your damage done to that enemy by 10%. And that effect can occur once every 3 seconds. So if you're applying your light attacks every 3 seconds, that should pretty much keep that debuff up on the Parse dummy, if that's something you're interested in. So let's just get into the Battle Scrolls add-on here, and I will go into the build here. This is a really good screen here to use for the build because it shows you a lot of information. It tells you all the traits and the gear and the skills and whatnot. So I'm going to use this to display the build. I am a Dark Elf Warden with the Thief Mundus Stone. The 2 class masteries that I'm using are Wild Adaptation and Glacial Obstinance. And then the food I have on this build is Ghastly Eyeball. I'm going to skip the skills here for a second. We're going to do the CP first, and then we'll do the gear and the skills after that. So for the blue warfare tree, I have Deadly Aim, increasing single target damage by 6%. Then I have Wrathful Strikes, increasing spell effectiveness by 205 weapon and spell damage. And then also Master at Arms, increasing direct damage by 6%. And then Exploiter, which increases your damage done to off-balance enemies by 10%. That's really important to slot on a Parse dummy because they automatically give you off balance at 100% automatically. But if you don't have that in a real content environment, then you may want to swap that out for something like Fighting Finesse or another CP that you feel is sufficient. So let's see here. The red tree, Boundless Vitality, gives you max health. Fortified gives you armor. Rejuvenation, I'm only slotting that for the Parse because it gives you recoveries. You could probably slot something else like siphoning spells or something like that in content, depending on if you're going to proc that, or another CP that would be helpful depending on what you're doing. And then Celerity for movement speed, because that's always nice to have. Green tree doesn't really matter much other than I have Steed's Blessing for movement speed and the 2 horse buffs of Gifted Rider and Warmount, and then Master Gatherer in case I happen to farm any nodes at all. That'll go faster, but the green tree is kind of not important. So as I said previously, I'm using 5 pieces of Aerie's Cry, and as you can see how this is displayed on the screen, it's got 5x on one side and then a \4x. So that'll tell you what is present on your front bar is 5 pieces. What is present on your back bar is 4 pieces. How I set this build up is I have 2 5-piece sets that never drop below 4 pieces at a time. I like to build that way to get as much power out of the 5-piece sets as I can. I have a full monster set of Selene, and then I am using the new mythic, the Shattered Paths Signet. I have 1 piece of light gear and 6 medium. All of the armor is divines with Magicka glyphs. All of the jewelry are bloodthirsty with increased weapon damage, and then I have 2 daggers that are both charged on the front bar. One of them has a flame enchant, the other has a frost enchant, and then the back bar is an infused Inferno Staff with a weapon damage glyph on that. Okay, so let's get into where these skills are sitting. The front bar, as you can see, I have Inner Light. This does a couple of things for me. This does give me Major Prophecy and Savagery on my front bar, and it also gives me a fairly decent amount of Max Magicka and Mag Recovery from the Mages Guild passives, as well as the skill itself gives you 5% Max Magicka. So this is a really good thing to slot on the Warden because it can be tough to sustain Magicka on their builds. So this is really good to try and implement. Another thing for Warden, if you're trying to build a Magicka Warden, you need to really focus on trying to mix in some stamina skills in there so that it's not so difficult to sustain the Magicka. And that's what I've done here by using the Subterranean Assault, which is the poison damage morph. And then also Screaming Cliff Racer is the spammable on this build. So this is going to help you knock enemies off balance, and it will give you some weapon damage as well. And then I have Bird of Prey slotted on here. Not necessary while you're parsing in terms of getting the Minor Berserk, because that is already given to you by the dummy, but in content this is going to be helpful because it will also give you more critical damage from the animal passive, or animal companions passive, excuse me. And then we have Barb Trap on the front bar. This is here for a multitude of reasons. One, it gives me minor force on the build, increasing my critical damage by 10%. It will also proc the hemorrhage status effect, and it will also proc the Fighters Guild passives, giving me more damage and more ultimate when I kill things. So this is doing a lot of work here on the build. I have Ice Comet from the Mages Guild slotted on my front bar to proc additional Mages Guild passives of Max Magicka and Mag Recovery. This is really helpful. While you're using the Shattered Paths Signet, it is not recommended that you fire your ultimate. So whatever you do put there is going to pretty much just sit there. I would recommend, if you're going to maybe trade something else out, maybe consider putting the bear ultimate there. Just don't pull him out, because there is a small caveat of, if you have the bear summoned, just get to the verbiage here, while Feral Guardian is active, so you can still have the bear slotted, just don't pull him out, because if the bear is active, then that's going to reduce your effectiveness of the Shattered Paths Signet by half. So keep that in mind. Also, on the front bar, you could put maybe Flawless Dawnbreaker to give you more damage from the Fighters Guild passive. But I like to have the extra mag recovery on my front bar. It really helps to sustain the build. But we'll get into the back bar now. Back bar, we have Betty Netch. This gives me major brutality and sorcery, as well as a Magicka pool. And also, if I don't have any negative effects on me, it will increase my damage done by 5% for 5 seconds. So basically, if you keep this up on a parse, it's going to be 100% up the entire time, because you don't really take a negative effect and it'll just refresh. Next up is Fetcher Infestation. This does magic damage. If you cast it a second time, this ability will do 60% more damage, and it inflicts the enemy with minor vulnerability. Minor vulnerability is already present on the dummy, so if you find something that you want to parse with that does as good a damage as this or better, then that would be good to swap out. This is a back bar. Maybe you swap out something that costs stamina to ease up your. I need to fix this skill real quick. I just noticed this back bar skill is supposed to be blockade. There we go. And then next up we have Winter's Revenge. This is from the Winter's Embrace skill line. This does frost damage. It has a higher chance to proc chilled status, and I have this on the back bar for a couple of reasons. This is increased by 30% if you cast this with a destruction staff, so that's why I have this on the back bar. I run this on the front bar a lot of times because it's short, but because I have an Inferno staff back here, this is going to increase the damage quite a bit of this. So then I have Blockade of Fire on the L1 skill button. This does a lot of damage. It will also inflict burning quite frequently, and it will increase the damage it does by 10% if the enemy is burning. Lastly, on the back bar for regular skills, I have Arctic Blast. This does frost damage every 2 seconds and can stun an enemy. It has a higher chance to proc the chilled status effect as well. And then I have Northern Storm on the back bar. Again, I don't use this on the build. This is just here um, basically to just fill in the spot or give me more resistances on the back bar because I have a Winter's Embrace skill slotted. So the Frozen Armor is in place with that because I have 2 skills on the back bar for, actually 3, for the Winter's Embrace. So that makes me tankier on my back bar, giving me 3,720 more physical and spell resistance on my back bar. So those are the skills. Now I'll touch on the gear specifically so you have that. I have a charged Perfected Dagger of the Depths with a flame glyph, and then I have a charged Aerie's Cry Dagger with a frost glyph. So both of those are charged, one flame, one frost. The reason why I like to do a front bar like this is because then that helps you keep both sets active for 4 pieces at a time, regardless of what bar you're on. So you get to take advantage of more buffs from your 5-piece sets. Then I have a Perfected Inferno Staff of the Depths. If you don't have the perfected version of this set, you're just going to lose out on that extra critical chance line there. So if you just have the normal Whorl of the Depths, you're only missing out on 3% critical chance. It's not a massive change in the build. So use what you can with this. So that is an infused Inferno Staff of the Depths with the weapon damage glyph. The Selene monster set is medium in divines on both pieces. And then I have Aerie's Cry, medium on the jack. The waist piece is the light depths in divines with the Magicka glyph. Aerie's Cry, medium bracers, guards, and feet, all divines with Magicka glyphs. Those are all medium Aerie's Cry. Then I have 2 pieces of jewelry here, Perfected Depths, ring, and necklace with bloodthirsty weapon damage glyphs. If you're going to build this build, I recommend highly that you use the Perfected Trials gear here, and that is going to save you on chromium platings. It's going to make it easier to make this build because the mythic already comes golded out, and if you've got the perfected jewelry, that also just comes in gold value. So make sure you put your jewelry pieces here as the trials setup, and that's going to help you build a lot cheaper. You're only going to need rosin, drow wax, and tempering alloys for the other pieces, for the daggers and the staff and the armor. So that'll save you at least on having to spend money or resources on chromium platings if you put your perfected trials gear on the jewelry. Then, of course, I have the Shattered Paths Signet in Bloodthirsty with a weapon enchant as well. So I would recommend leaning into the mag recovery on this. It's kind of can be tricky to sustain on this, but I'll just go ahead and hit the dummy here and buff up, and we'll see what the numbers look like. As you can see, I've got 7,500 here weapon damage when I hit the dummy. My critical chance goes up to 45%, and I've got 37,000 max magicka with 1,585 mag recovery. So there's a decent amount of mag recovery. Oh, that's not even with my spell power pot. So let me hit that. We'll get the better. So with a tripod, excuse me, I have 1,956 mag recovery with 1,303 stamina recovery. So that is the numbers with it buffed up on the dummy, pretty much not doing anything. And as I said before, I want to cover this a little bit in detail. I have 3 different parses here. Let me shut that off so I don't have that. So I have 3 different parses here that I was testing with. I hit 122,000 on that parse, 123, and then another 122. I am not a proficient light attack weaver, so I don't want to project that this is going to be like a 150,000 build for people, but somebody that's more proficient with light attack weaving is probably going to hit higher than I am. But I do want to stress that it is fairly easy to get into this neighborhood of 120. Just to show you how I recommend light attack weaving rather, is number one, I will stress and really try and promote the fancy action bar is really helpful because it gives you numerical values to look at for your skills. So just to give you an idea of how easy it is to hit the 120 numbers, I'm not going to do a full parse in the video because that would be a little bit more lengthy, but I just want to show how easy it is to get the number on this build. So I recommend light attacking first and then firing your skill and then watching the timers on your skill and trying to tag that 1 second time that you see the number ticking down on the screen. It makes it so you don't need a metronome. You can just watch that number right there that's ticking on the Betty skill, and you can use that for your metronome. And so you can just light attack skill, 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 light attack skill. And you can just basically get through your skills. And as soon as you get everything ramped up, then you can kind of really get into your rotation. And I'm talking during this and I'm still hitting well over 100,000 DPS, which I would say is perfectly fine for most content in this game. As you can see, I'm up and over 112 now, that everything is getting ramped up and I'm starting to apply some status effects. So as you can see, this is fairly easy to get up and on into the 120s. If you can just keep your skills up by light attacking first and then applying your skill right when that 1 second time is going to tick. As you can see, it's fairly easy to keep that damage up into the 120 range. It's going to be a little bit more nerve-wracking when you get into content and you actually have to dodge mechanics, but this is how I would recommend practicing, is watching your timers on the fancy action bar. And as you can see, while I'm talking, I'm hitting 120,000 on this dummy with no problem. And I don't really have a set rotation for this. I just basically keep it pretty dynamic in terms of just reapplying stuff when it's falling off. Try to stay on your front bar as quickly as possible so that if stuff falls off, you're getting back on the front bar for that extra critical chance and the critical damage that you get from having the animal companions skills slotted on your front bar. You also want to keep your main buffs of Major Brutality and Sorcery and Savagery and Prophecy up on your front bar. That'll keep your critical chance up higher if you stay on your front bar because of the daggers as well as the inner light being there. And I guess I may as well just finish the parse here since I've done most of this here on the video. But just to show you how easy this is to get 120,000 on this pure class Magicka Warden build. I'm not using an execute or an ultimate. So if you were to implement that into the build somehow, that's going to maybe change your numbers this way or that way. But as you can see, I just hit 120,000 in the video while talking. I missed 68 light attacks while doing that. So it's not 100% necessary that you are on target with your light attacks and everything, but as you can see, we'll just go over the damage of what is present on that parse that I just did in the video. Chilled is doing a lot of damage on this build, as you can see. 3,210,000 damage from the chilled status effect itself. Screaming Cliff Racer, the spammable, did 2.7 million. Subterranean Assault is doing 10% of my DPS as well, a large amount there. Selene is coming in with 7.6%. Whorl of the Depths is at 1.3 thousand. Winter's Revenge is doing a lot of damage, and there's Eagle's Mark. This is the Aerie's Cry. This is just the Eagle's Mark. Don't discount the set in and of itself, because that's also increasing your damage done to the dummy by 10%. This is just the actual eagle swooping in doing that physical damage. So if you're looking at this number and thinking, wow, Eagle's Cry isn't doing much, that's not accounting for the 10% increase in damage that it's also giving you. This is just the Eagle's Mark, so be careful with discounting the set too badly with that number there. Then you have Burning and Blockade of Fire kind of going hand in hand there. Fetcher Infestation, Arctic Blast, and then Barb Trap here. And then we've got some more status effects down here towards the bottom that are kind of randomly just getting applied from the Shattered Paths light attack proccing. So one thing I want to talk about really quickly before I close out the video is how status effects are applied. Because I think a lot of people might lean into, for example, putting a frost staff on the front of this. You don't really need to do that, because how status effects are applied. If you come here to the inventory and you go to the Mundus and you go into you go into your inventory, hit view more info, if you see that on the bottom screen there when you're on your Mundus, and then go to the very top of this video or menu. Then the status effects here are listed. It'll tell you what they do, but then here towards the bottom of this menu right here, this is going to tell you how they are applied. So when you're building your builds, regardless of what class you're on, if you look at this right here, this is going to tell you how status effects are applied. You have from your weapon enchants, and then you have from your skills, the single target direct damage skills, your area of effect direct damage skills, your single target damage over time abilities or skills, your area of effect damage over time skills or effects. So if you look at the very bottom here, light attacks and heavy attacks, you cannot apply a status effect from a light attack. So specifically leaning into a frost staff is not necessarily going to increase your chance to proc chilled from light attacks anyway. Now, if you're going to use, for example, historically, I know the Dragonstar Arena Ice Staff was very common on builds. You would use the Perfected Master's Ice Staff, and then where you're getting that uptime on chilled from that setup is because you're going to use the Destructive Touch either morph here, and this ability was in and of itself applying the chilled. So what I would recommend is you could use this if you wanted to, but I would say maybe go into a lightning staff, especially for this, because then, or excuse me, the clinch, because then it's going to hit in an AoE, and then you put a frost glyph on that, and that will make it so that you're going to proc the frost glyph at a higher chance rate. So just keep that in mind. I would go with a charged front weapon on this build, especially because the idea is to try and apply status effects as much as possible. And if you have two front bar weapons that are charged, that is going to equate to 235% increased chance of what you are dealing with in those tables where it shows you how to apply the status effect here. So the percentage increase of chance is you applying them to these percentages here. Not if you see 100% increase, for example, if you go into the destruction staff skill line and you look at the passive that says elemental force that increases your chance to apply status effects by 100%. That looks like on paper that it's going to be a guarantee. That's not what that is doing. This is 100% increase to apply the status effect by these methods that are listed. So it's basically increasing your chance by 100% is going to double these numbers here. It's not going to guarantee your application of a status effect. So just keep that in mind if you're going to try and adjust this build or make something else outside of this build completely. Just keep that in mind. That is how those things are applied. So it's not necessarily you got to build with a frost staff. You can run daggers, but just make sure you have a frost glyph on your weapon, and that will handle, as you can see here, I applied the chilled status effect in that parse 161 times, and it critically strike 66 times. So it did a total amount of damage of 3,210,000. Now that's not just from the glyph, it also likely proc from Winter's Revenge and Whirl of the Depths, but I have a 20% chance to get the application applied at base from just that glyph. So this is likely coming a large amount from that charged glyph procking. So just keep that in mind when you're building. You don't necessarily have to lean into the frost staff. You can use daggers, and that's going to increase your build damage because you're going to have two different glyphs on your front bar, one flame and frost if you build like this, rather than just one on an inferno staff or lightning staff or a frost staff. So I just wanted to cover that a little bit in case that's something that needed to be explained. But if you thought this build was interesting, if you liked the video or if you thought it was helpful, please consider liking my video and subscribing to my YouTube channel. I have a very large catalog of videos on the Elder Scrolls Online, and I have organized them all by created playlists. And if you go onto my YouTube channel, go to my playlist tab or go down to my playlists that I have created, you will see all those organized there, and they are isolated by subject. So I have overall guides, I have add-on videos, I have DPS videos, tanking videos, healer videos, all kinds of stuff. Check them out and see if there's anything there that interests you. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in another video. Bye.